everyone. Namaskar, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, wherever you are in the world. Today we have Mr. Saktibrata Sen on behalf of CH20 and Room to Read India. I welcome you all to this session, which is all about Scarborough Reading Rope and various reading strategies. We have today Saktibrata Sen, Program Director of Room to Read, India's literacy and girls' education program. He brings in 15 plus years of intensive expertise in program management, implementation, and evidence based advocacy and lobbying. From developing literacy skills and reading habitat among children to supporting girls, to finish secondary schools and working with government stakeholders to advocate for girls' education. Saktibrata Sen design quality oriented and scalable programs. And he is also dedicated towards developing professional focused on earlier literacy, teacher professional developments, and text creations for children. Sir Explanary's work in Indian scripts and languages and passion for bringing children's literature into the classroom make him stand out among the program leaders in the education and development sector in India. Thank you so much, sir, for joining the session. We are really glad to host you today for this particular theme, and we really look forward for an engaging session. Thank you so much. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Manisha. I'm really honored that you have had me here today. Um, Today happens to be the 15th of August, our 76th Indian Independence Day, and I'm here happy to speak about how to become an independent reader. So I think the core value of independence is something which comes in all of our lives in some way or the other, and we really need to strive for it and aspire for it. But I think the biggest aspiration that we can have today is to become an independent learner and an independent reader. And that's where probably talking about literacy is becoming more and more important for us. It's not only because of the day to day, it is also because of the world that we are living in. I would want to share a few thoughts about literacy that I have gathered. I have been shaping those thoughts. I've been thinking about them deeply. That is in turn shaping my work. They are about literacy per se in the human brain as well as in government systems. We, as Room to Read, work very closely with the government systems, and therefore, I have had the good fortune of seeing literacy unfolding in not only in that individual child's brain mind space, but also literacy evolving as a subject of implementation in the government school systems. It has been 15 years that I have been working, and the tacit knowledge that the government system has now is yet to become a more explicit knowledge, and we are all hoping and working towards that. We just hope that the knowledge gets more organized and readily available to the practitioners out there. But let's first talk about literacy as one of the most coveted skills of our times. I must also point out at the right at the very beginning that I am a practitioner. In the truest sense of the term, I'm not an academician. I would love to be one, but I'm not an academician. I'm a practitioner, which means that I build up my knowledge by looking at how children learn to read and how systems learn to deliver. So we are fundamentally looking at knowledge out of practice. That is where our unique position is when it comes to literacy. And let me evoke many brilliant researchers in the world of cognitive neuroscience today, and who say that the human brain wasn't actually designed to read and be literate. I mean, I know that's a startling sentence, but let's understand that in the right light. The way our brain resources are often uh, get recycled when we are learning to read a script and understand the meaning uh, entrenched in it. When we are trying to construct a meaning, construct a worldview, construct an opinion, construct criticality, do intense linguistic information processing, this is not exactly what the brain's genetic function is all about. It is about recycling many of the existing resources of the brain by the sheer presence of a skill that, for us laymen, it is termed as neuroplasticity, and that is what makes reading possible. Now let's understand what is reading. What is this literacy all about? It is an ability to negotiate a script with an effective speed. Let me put an underline onto that word effective. An effective speed to be able to construct and extract the meaning that is there, entrenched in the script, that is harbored in the script. But let's also understand that reading is a very individualized process, and the entire meaning that the reader constructs is not probably only in the script itself. It is also in the reader's background knowledge, the reader's attitude towards reading, the reader's practice with reading. Look, we wouldn't have been bothering about reading if humankind did not invent writing, let's say 3,000 years back. Writing makes speech or an utterance much more permanent, but it also makes that utterance very, very muted. So when we hear somebody speak, we hear the prosody, we hear the highs and lows of the voice, and it is much easier for us to construct the meaning, to be engaged in a conversation. But while we are reading, we may be reading an inscription from the yesteryears, which means it has stayed on for centuries. But at the same time, it is mute. It does not have, apparently, the richness of. I'm sorry if there was a disruption, whatever the reason was. So I'll just start from wherever I am, wherever I left it. Um, so let's understand uh, that reading is about extracting and constructing the meaning that is already harbored in the written script. And for that, since the writing is mute, reading encourages you to think while you are reading. If you look at Scarborough's rope, listening are not the same things, because listening is only dependent on the auditory inputs, while reading is auditory. As I mean, it's not, reading is not auditory. It is mostly based on the ophthalmic lobes. It is based on your eyesight. It is based on your eye's ability to read. The eye movements along the directionality of the print. Your eye movement on the script when you are pausing on a sentence to understand, okay, what it was all about. So reading does draw brilliantly from the speech, the oral language, our vocabulary, our background knowledge. But reading propels you to think. Reading propels you to actively look for meaning in whatever you are reading. So you're not just decoding. I mean, this is a very interesting picture that I have, which talks about, which talks about, which talks about, how parallel is the processing of reading. It is not non-sequential. It is non-sequential. So So let's get back to the Scarborough Rope, because I don't think I have much time left. If you would see that the Scarborough Rope, the red and blue principles, the blue ropes, they indicate certain principles that have to work in unison. It is about working together. It is about parallel processing. So the language comprehension, my ability to know the language that I'm reading in, is extremely important, along with my ability to read the script, my ability to recognize the word in print in front of me. And there are many things that we have to understand if we really want to get into it. For example, the script matters. So whichever script you are reading does does influence your speed of reading, your way of reading, how you should be taught in classrooms, and what should be the comprehension strategies. The script. Let's understand the script is a cultural artifact. It is not just a device to harbor the the script. Is not about just to harbor the language that you want to read or the message that you want to read. It's not just about understanding what is written. It is also influenced by a lot of cultural practices around. So as a culture, for example, if you look at certain Semitic cultures, is comprehension and reading culturally side by side together? Maybe, may not be. If you look at the Chinese morphopictorial scripts, then we must understand that there is a certain way in which that needs to be learned. When you're looking at Indian alpha syllabaries, uh, the units, the aksharas or units, the alpha syllabary units that we call about, which have the characteristics which is unique to themselves of both a syllable and an alphabet, they need to be learned in a certain way. They need to be learned in a certain way. And all of this matters in letting us know how the script needs to be taught. What is the amount of time that one needs to give to teaching decoding, to teach phonological awareness? Is phonological awareness required in the script and the language premise that I'm trying to teach child reading in? Is it important to define a set of vocabulary in which the vocabulary needs to be taught as a specific sight vocabulary as we do in English? So there are various reasons in which, for linguists, I mean, there were completely linguistic reasons and conventions based on linguistic reasons as to why the script will matter, and it will tell you how to teach reading in a certain way. Whereas the language comprehension, my ability to draw from rich language, my ability to draw from my world of experience, which is a lot of which is linguistically coded, all of this needs to put together to be able to say that I am a successful and independent reader. So what is needed? So what these red and blue strands are showing fundamentally are that there has to be a strand, the blue strand, which needs to be automatized. There has to be fluency in that strand. And there has to be that red thread, which needs to be more strategic, more criticality, more thinking, the ethics of reading, all need to be woven into that strand. And together, when they're intertwined, when they're put into one class process or one brain process, this is where the Scarborough rope starts becoming more and more meaningful. the reading becomes meaningful. Reading becomes an ability to delve into deeper informations that are already entrenched in the text and the world that it shows, in the knowledge hierarchy that it shows. And then we should be able to effectively, almost automatically, learn to decode the script to be able to think while we are reading. That's the parallelity. That's how reading becomes parallel. So, the more, one may argue that in a classroom, how do we start? Do we really need to start everything together? Well, I would leave that decision to you. It is good to start everything parallelly. But if in the language, in the script that you're teaching, there are certain skills that need to be in place before one needs to teach certain other, take that little time, but at the same time, remember that no skill is to be treated in isolation. Do not treat decoding in isolation or comprehension in isolation. Do not make anything mechanical. It has to be very, very meaning based, and we have to understand that it has to be the drills, the mechanics of reading and the thinking portion of reading coming together. David, our understanding of words or the depth of the understanding of words do affect what we have gathered out of that text. For example, is your meaning of a word at a very superficial level, or is your meaning at a very deep semantic level? For example, if you look at, you've named the Quran, the Bible, and the Bhagavad Gita, you would see that in all of these very traditional texts, there is a very strong discipline about how a certain word is to be interpreted. And this entire world of interpretations of these texts do give us a cue about how should we understand it. But when I have a question here, if you guys, if all of us are only given a certain standard way of interpreting a word, do we say that we as human beings do not have an agency to interpret a text in a way that is suitable to us? I had started my little presentation with a focus on independence, on being an independent reader. If I'm constantly told that this is the semantics, or this is the large discursive pattern in which reading needs to happen, or reading of a certain word or an interpretation of a certain word needs to happen, am I saying that I do not have an agency? Well, that's debatable. It is good to acknowledge the fact that there is a discipline of semantics of all of these texts, or any text for that matter, but there is also an agency, and our negotiation is constantly between what is already there, the cultural evolution of the collective human brain, and our individual propensities, our individual human brain, where we are trying to understand and negotiate meaning. If you've known to do that well, you are an independent reader. What you get out of it has to be left to you as an individual. That's a very personal opinion, David. I'm not too sure that is going to make you happy, but that's how I look at it.
Yes, so sir, as you mentioned the importance of reading and all, I would like to know your point of view in this digital era where, a lot of things are shifting towards visualizations, like where, today's generation prefer to, rather than reading, they prefer watching a video or listening to a audio. So, what is your point of view that how much reading is important at times rather than going for an audio or a visual video?
Well, if you're watching a video, um, well, you are having a visual input. But just imagine when you much of the social media that we use today, well, I do not use any. I was born under the stars when social medias were not there. So when I look at the social media behavior of today, I can clearly see that I am reading digitally almost all the time, whether it's a WhatsApp message, whether it's an Instagram feed or Snapchat or Facebook. I mean, there should be other names that I do not know. I'm quite a fossil. Uh, there could be various things where it is the input is also textual, albeit it's in a digital format, yet it's a script. So we are reading, for us, the brain, we are reading on print and on non-print. We are reading on our phone screens all the time. The question is, when we start looking at the larger world of digital inputs, we see that the digital input, the digital information comes to us almost in the form of an avalanche. There is too much of information to process. And what happens when we have too much of information to process? We start superficially skimming through information, and we do not go deep. So, what happens is the biggest uh, casualty in this whole process is a deeper critical engagement with the text. I mean, I remember how many times in the COVID uh, slowdown or lockdown periods have I passed on information out of just insecurities and fear, not really thinking, was that important to send? Which means that we are consuming information and almost sharing it out, disseminating it out without even pausing and thinking. Whereas when we sit with a book, we tend to think. I think this is just a social construction of, I mean, that has happened with the reading experiences of these two media. I will not blame or give credit to anyone. My only point is, if we can bring that deeper thinking, deeper reading, deeper comprehension that we generally do with books into the world of digital reading, I think we will solve the problem to a lot. I mean, lot more. Now the question is, what happens for children? How much of screen time and how much of print time? It is said, we can clearly see researchers that are telling us that for children, it is the print time which matters more and a little less of screen time. We are not saying banish screen time all the way out. So our brains have to be, in our world, our brains have to be biliterate in the sense that they have to be very proficient in all formats of reading, digital or print. But to be able to understand that entire process of reading so that I can replicate the depth in a digital media, we really need to start with print first. Does that answer your question, Manisha?
Definitely, sir.
I think that is not unfortunate to have different meanings of one word. That is just what makes semantics and human experiences around semantics very, very diverse. This is where, I mean, let's argue that if one word has more than one meaning, I would not say that's a problem. I would say that, is my meaning as rigorous as yours? And if our meanings are rigorous enough, are we searching for our own meanings? And are we respecting our own meanings if they are completely different and antagonistic? I think the diversity matters, the depth matters, the respect matters, the ethics matters. And it is that search for truth which navigates through these various traditions and various understandings of the text is one day going to give us the required independence that I'm talking about. It's a long journey. So I would say it is good to have diverse words, diverse meanings of one word. I'm sorry. Let me just end with one thought, which I want everybody to be thinking, that to be able to take decisions as a policymaker or as a teacher in your classroom, a policymaker in your government, or or somebody dealing with higher education, let's understand where are we having our relevant knowledge for literacy from. The stream that is feeding into literacy these days, a lot, and very, very deeply so, is cognitive neuroscience, along with linguistics, along with psycholinguistics, along with psychology, along with sociolinguistics, along with language policies and politics, everything. A lot of it is being, a lot of the knowledge, a lot of the relevant knowledge for literacy for a teacher, policymaker, educator, content creator, every one of us, it is the contribution is coming from the stream of cognitive neuroscience. And we really need to understand what cognitive neuroscience is telling us about reading. We have to be deep thinkers who cannot, as practitioners also, we need to be deep thinkers who should probably, and as I was saying, that it is important for us to look for the relevant knowledge for our policies, practices, curriculum, content development, everything from the world of research in cognitive neuroscience and many other disciplines. And we also need to look at our own practices and put somewhere a bridge between the two. I think this is my most important message today, that look for the right knowledge, look for the right place to practice it, and then inform your curriculum process or policies or teaching practices, anything for that matter.